free. I'm not saying leave a good comment, but why not? You know what I mean? Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me as usual, David Morassutti. We're hoping to have the play-by-play guy of the Calgary Stampeders.
He's here, Frank.
Is he? Oh, okay. Good. So he's David Morris. Oh, I couldn't see you over my script. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. We're 1-1. You're 2-0-2. So that's unusual ground for the Calgary Stampeders, isn't it?
Oh, very much. Yeah, this is certainly unexpected. First time since 2009 that they've been in this situation. And with a shortened schedule, obviously the pressure and everything's going to ramp up in a big hurry there.
Aside from that, though, it's been really great to watch football, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. 2 games in 5 days in the case of McMahon Stadium. And just across the league, I don't know about you, but I've been watching just about as much as I can. So it's been very exciting to see all the football back at all the various stadiums. And glad to see the season's underway. 2 weeks in the books. Bare minimum of problems, at least as far as the big picture issues are concerned. There's individual team issues, but big pictures, there aren't any.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of the concerns that we might have had, knock on wood, have been alleviated, where concerns as far as that 5-letter word we don't like to talk about. Yeah. Okay. So we won't talk about it. We'll just be glad that it's not a part of what we're doing. David, I know how happy you are to see football coming back. Regardless, win or lose, it's just great to watch some great football, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I expected the football to not be, pristine to start the season with no preseason, but I don't think it hasn't been any short of excitement. I mean, I'll even stay up to watch the 10 o'clock Eastern start times for the games out west, namely that Saskatchewan Hamilton game.
1 o'clock, it was still being played here in the East.
And I definitely, it did help that it was a Friday night game. I will say, having those games pushed, closer to the weekend definitely does help. But yeah, it's a matter of getting the mind, ready for the marathon, of the 3 days of football. It's a grind, but it's a grind that we've been missing for sure.
It's a grind we all want. So why don't we go through it? We've got Mark here. The first game was on Thursday, and it featured the British Columbia Lions and the Calgary Stampeders. British Columbia won 15-9. My review of that game is the BC Lions started poorly in 2019. They worked out their woes with their offensive line. While they were working out their woes with their offensive line, Mark, they also started to improve their defense. And I think that's the biggest problem Calgary had on Thursday night.
Well, they certainly had a problem with not only some pressure on Bo Levi Mitchell. He was pressured a lot, a couple of sacks. But yeah, BC's line just didn't allow the Stampeders to do very much. That was certainly a big part of it. It wasn't the only part, but it certainly was a big part of what was going on. And it threw Bo Levi Mitchell off. And there's that and a bunch of other reasons that led to a career worst 4 interceptions there.
Defense, David, was BC's defense really a difference? And we'll go on to Mark's. We want to hear Mark's second point after that.
No, I think it's been a not just with that game, but most games, defense has been key for a lot of teams. But I don't remember the last time I've seen Bo Levi Mitchell throw that many picks, especially when he needed to make plays and it didn't go his way. So yeah, BC. It's some very good. I think they made it a point to improve that defense. I was a little curious about how their defense would play, considering they would need a better defense if their offense wasn't going to be able to move the ball. The offense is still a question mark a little bit at times, but some good Canadian content on that defense too. Ontario content that was made known on the broadcast. I believe 3 players on that defense come from Ontario, so that's that gives a little bit of boost for us over here in the East to see some local products do well for BC.
Yeah, your second point, Mark, and to David's point, it's nice to hear good news from the East when it comes to football.
Well, the last several years, it's been quite one-sided about Western teams dominating Eastern teams, so it's not quite the same as far as this year is concerned, at least in the early going.
Yeah, you had a second point. Aside from the defense, there were other reasons why BC came on top.
Well, 4 interceptions by Bo Levi Mitchell, and the Stampeders continue their horrible stretches of play in the score zone. They're one of 8 through their first 2 games. That's terrible. That's not going to win you enough, and consequently, they've got just 1 touchdown through 2 games. So that's something that has to be cleaned up ASAP, or they're going nowhere, because you just can't live on a diet like that.
Yeah, but in fairness to the Calgary Stampeders, and especially Bo Levi Mitchell, his receiving core was playing for the other team in the first game. There's a lot, the plug and play that Calgary had a reputation for isn't working out early in the season. That's not to suggest that it won't work out later on, right?
That's fair. Yeah, I would agree. But with the 14-game season, it better get on track in a hurry. But you're right. They look like a team that just really isn't together. It doesn't mean there's any animosity. It's just they don't look like a team that's really together now. Maybe that's the function of being in McMahon, going right into the training camp, and then right into the season. It looks just like one long continuous camp. Other teams have it too, so I don't want to say it's a Stampeder only problem. But yeah, it's an issue, and they got to get better pretty quick.
Hey, David, time is a ticking.
Yeah, and I just heard before we got on, Bo Levi Mitchell might not even start this week. He's dealing with a leg injury. It could be Michael O'Connor getting the start. And I was mentioned many times on the broadcast that Bo just did not look himself, didn't feel like himself, throwing the ball. And, he's not a guy that moves a lot, but if you're hampered by any injury, that's going to impact how you're throwing and how you're just managing the pocket and getting your steps in, for sure.
Yeah, a couple of years. Oh, no, go ahead. I was just gonna say and let you go, Mark, with the fact that Bo has been hurt before and tried playing through his injuries. In fact, a couple of years ago with his shoulder.
Yep, and I think that's healed, but he has been bothered by a groin injury. He didn't do much during training camp, and sometime around the top of the hour, we're going to get the update. It's kind of nothing's coming easy. The Stampeders changed their outdoor practice today. They went to an indoor facility nearby because it is just horrendous smoke here. It's orange outside right now, and that's just what we're dealing with. So we can't even watch and see what's going on. So it's nothing comes easy this year.
Now, let's discuss a little bit about the BC Lions. I mean, we have that relationship now developing between betting and, of course, the CFL. The betting organization that's their sponsor might not be too pleased with Mike Riley and his is he in? Is he not in? Is he in? Is he not in?
Fair, and I think they're going to have to come up, the league, and so will the prospective sponsors, come up with a list of guidelines of what they expect from the CFL teams. I mean, that's, it's something you don't expect to see a professional team do, is just abruptly pull the quarterback out like that, or abruptly substitute the quarterback or something like that. Obviously, every once in a while, there are extenuating circumstances, but it just seems to be right now, they're just waiting and guessing till the last minute possible.
This is one of your favorite topics, David. So there you go. I mean, this is the first, little mix-up that needs to be ironed out.
I mean, I'm going to bring the NFL into here quickly because when a player is playing or not playing. They have that set up well before kickoff happens, so that all that stuff can be ironed out. But I think I don't know. People were trying to say, is this BC trying to throw a wrench into their opposition's game plan by not naming a starting quarterback or having the starting quarterback kind of be a game time decision? I don't think it is, and I think it's more so just Michael Riley needs to determine, is he good? Like, does he feel good? Is his I know his elbow is an issue. I know that there is an injury there. We saw it in that first game that he played. He did not look right. I just think that it's the CFL that has to come down and say, we need to have your starting lineup. Your choices need to be made at a certain time. Maybe they have to make warm-ups earlier so that you're not that close to kickoff and naming a starter, 15 minutes before, and then everything kind of just gets moves around. It makes for great discussion. It makes for great theater when you have those last minute changes. But if the CFL wants to make gambling a source of revenue, they're gonna have to as a league make that decision of when those lineup decisions have to be made.
Mark, perception is reality, right? So you can't look like you're not doing what needs to be done either, right?
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I I would love to get into the decision-making process that went on there before all this information was out there. But you're right; it's left a lot of people standing around and trying to guess at what's going on.
Yeah, under Randy Ambrosi, we've seen a lot of issues that needed to be ironed out, ideas that were tried, like even going back to the pass interference. There were a lot of rough edges that needed to be cleaned up, and we do know that the CFL is capable of cleaning up some of those rough edges.
Hope so. There's a few things. One other one I would like to see them clean up is the length of time on reviews. I mean, if they make a call out there, it's pass interference and the team challenges. Okay, that's the way it is. But if you don't find enough evidence to overturn it in the first 60 seconds, does the evidence exist? But we've seen a lot of these conferences go on and on and on and on and on. And, in the case of the Toronto game a couple of weeks ago, there were 2 challenges within a couple of minutes and that just dragged out. So I would like to see the league implement, a 1-minute rule. If you don't find it in a minute, does it exist?
Well,
Does
in
it need
fairness,
evidence to overturn?
you're 100% right, Mark, because in fairness to the officials, they're making a split-second decision.
Yep.
You should at least limit how much video, because if you've got to slow it down and slow it down and slow it down and slow it down so many times, then obviously the call should stand that the official makes. But because at some point, the officials have to officiate.
Yep. And that's one thing that I would love to see them clean up is, a 60-second time limit. And if you see it, great. If you don't, the call stands because the evidence doesn't exist. That's the way I see it anyway.
Is there a predictability that maybe the replay people have to figure out? Because, when a ball is turned over, when there's a touchdown, immediately they're reviewed without waiting for, a coach to make. We've seen that too, where a coach has asked for review, but it was automatically being done. Should there be would that be part of the solution to the problem, is predicting, what might be reviewed?
I guess I'm sure they do. I'm sure as soon as a touchdown scored, they're winding it back and looking at it. So, I don't have any problems with the challenges per se. I just have, the administration just goes on and on in some cases, and as I say, if the evidence is there to overturn the call, okay, overturn it, get it right. But if you're looking frame by frame and spending 4 or 5 or 6 minutes, what are you trying to do? I guess that's what I say.
Yeah, I know. David, want to clean up this last topic?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that, there's only so much that you want. You want the referees' decisions to kind of mean something in the game as well, right? They have a job to do. They have to see this in real time. They don't have the benefit all the time of that slow down replay. So I think if the call is really obvious, you'll see it right away. I think if it takes you, as Mark said, takes you forever to get it done, I just think you're taking away from the impact of referees, and the fans are just going to be like, okay, how much longer do we have to go through the call? I think baseball's had that issue. Hockey has definitely had that issue. Challenging and replays is not a perfect system, but the best you can do is just make sure that you're using it for the right reasons.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to week 2, game 2. That's the Toronto Argonauts in Winnipeg. The Argos came up short on this one, 20-7. My quick comment on this is I'm not positive, but I sure got the impression that the Argos really allowed Winnipeg to get in their head to the point where they made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of penalties. They tried really hard on offense. There was miscommunication between the quarterback and the receivers. The defense was very aggressive, good for some situations, not so good for others. They were maybe tried a little bit too hard, in my opinion. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think Winnipeg probably has the 2 best lines in the league right now, both their defense and their offense, and that's going to make it tough for a lot of teams, including Toronto. I just thought McLeod Bethel Thompson, whatever he had here the week before, kind of disappeared. That was not a particularly aggressive attack, and it showed. And Nick Arbuckle came in and did a few good things. I don't know which way they go in Game 3, but against Winnipeg in the rematch. But I just think Winnipeg's going to give a lot of people trouble because of the issues related to their line. That's really good, both of them.
I just think that if you look at that game, you see Toronto have some success running the ball, and that takes away some pressure on your offensive line to have to drop back and defend the pass rush from Winnipeg. So that was the positive from Toronto, but the negative was that Winnipeg left plays there for the Argos to make. There were a lot of long throws, and I think maybe that's just Winnipeg realizing we don't think McLeod Bethel Thompson can beat us deep, and it showed. He only had 7 yards after he had a very impressive day against Calgary. But if you look back against Calgary, he wasn't throwing the ball deep a lot. Those were a lot of plays that either the receivers were getting some extra yards, or they were just chucking it, getting those 10 yards, getting that first down. So I think, Winnipeg, the pressure they put on defense is incredible. I mean, they have 3 guys that can just rush. They can rush all the time, and it's going to give the offensive line a fit. And I was a little concerned about whether their defensive backs could hold up as rookies. 3 rookies in the secondary. It didn't look like 3 rookies playing in the secondary in that game.
Plug and play.
Yep. No, Winnipeg, a very good team, and are they good enough to repeat? Don't know, but I think they'll certainly be around the conversation anyway.
And more about the quarterbacks. It seems as though under a tough defense, the chemistry that needs to develop between either of the quarterbacks on the Argos, and they're great receivers, and you know them quite well, Mark. I mean, that's a good set of receivers. But they do need to have a relationship. I know under Bo Levi Mitchell, he was very instructive when it came to his receivers. He had one basic idea, and that is run down the field as fast as you can, and I'll give you the ball. And, they didn't do that here in Toronto. A lot of their routes were cut short, and they were going horizontally instead of vertically. And I think that might have been an issue. McDaniel and of course, Macbeth, then they need to have a bit better understanding of each other, because there were a lot of opportunities for Macbeth to toss a wide open guy going downfield, touchdown on the horizon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he just didn't look the same, did he? Yeah, and part of that, cutting the roots off might have been the fact that there were players chasing him down, like Willie Jefferson and Jeffcoat. They're 2 of the best. So
from both edges, you can get creamed if you're the quarterback.
Yeah. And Big Hill in the middle too knows what.
Absolutely. Then you go there. Yeah, absolutely. David?
I mean, I looked at that Calgary, and Calgary was able to get some pressure on McLeod as well, especially when he wasn't exactly on his game. There were times where he wasn't completing those first downs and there was quite a few 2-and-outs. I just think Winnipeg just realized we're just gonna have to send as much pressure as we can.
This might be the Stampeders with the Bo Levi Mitchell thing. Just give you one
second. Take care of stuff.
So
we'll let him know. So we'll get some hot news as soon as Mark comes back. That's what happens when you have a reporter.
Exactly. No, we're going
on the show.
We're getting the scoop right now on the show.
We'll get it. Yeah. So as far as that, continue. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, I think with McLeod, there's adjustments you have to make when you have more pressure on you, and that's Winnipeg's game. And then if we're going to talk about the Blue Bombers and Zach Collaros, the thing is that Collaros had a lot of short field to work with. Whether it was turnovers, like there was a couple, there was the fumble by John White, there was kick returns, not able to not even to convert on third down. There was a couple of those. If you give the Blue Bombers a short field, they got the place to make it work. That touchdown to Nick Dembski was a work of art.
Absolutely.
Collaros looked comfortable. And I said you can't make Collaros look comfortable. You can't give him that extra second, because you give him that extra second, the receiver is going to get open. And
absolutely.
Timing. You said timing is everything, and Collaros and his receivers, for the most part, there were. I guarantee there were times where they weren't on sync. Like give the Argos defense credit. That game could have been a lot worse. They were able to get some turnovers. They were able to get some crucial 2-and-outs. But I also think that, when you look at that game, Toronto's offense just wasn't good enough to give their defense a chance.
I don't think there was a player in the Canadian Football League who benefited the most from this recess that we went through these 18 months more than Zach Collaros. This is a guy who really had a tough year in 2019, right from game one. And of course, he's had a bit of a career of problems. He's had more problems than most players have had to deal with. And I think this 18-month break has given his body a chance to recover, not under the pressure of having to be considered to start. We were watching, and we have been watching, the 2015 Zach Collaros, who MOP was his middle name.
On his way, yeah. So yeah, no, he's a good player. Daring gamble by Winnipeg last year, and it paid off. So keeping him healthy will be a challenge, but he's got a great line in front of him there. So there you are.
Yeah, if he can stay clean, we all know what's going to happen, and he's with a team that can help keep him clean. You know that he was happy to sign with Winnipeg once again because he has had some tough times, not as tough as Mike Riley, but still tough. He's had a couple of tough years.
Yeah, concussions are tough, unpredictable. Can't put him under the X-ray machine.
Absolutely. In conclusion of that game, how would you rack that up, Mark, with what we haven't left out, points that the fans may want to know about?
Just Winnipeg's really good, and they're going to be knocking off a lot of teams and slowing down a lot of teams. Those two halfbacks look tremendous. They're a very good team, and they're surviving without Darvin Adams. They're surviving without Andrew Harris. Those guys are going to come back in. So Toronto had their hands full, and they'll have their hands full again this weekend.
Yeah, they really are taking over the Calgary Stampeder plug and play reputation, at least early in the season.
Well, so far, yeah, and that's the model that they've used, yeah, is to try and be like Calgary, to be consistently successful, not just one-year wonders kind of thing. So
yeah,
that's the model.
Every football team is hoping to be that kind of team. David, conclusion of this game?
I think Toronto. I'm just hoping Toronto doesn't get too dejected. I know the players at the game were not happy with their performance, but you have to realize you're playing against a team that won the Grey Cup.
Absolutely.
The Argos were a team that was 4-14, right? So I know that the expectations on them is to win, but sometimes you have to also realize that you got to get there, and getting there means to go through these challenges along the way. So I think the home opener will be very key to see how they rebound from their first loss.
And to develop a much better game at home. The one thing that the 4-14 Argos did is they lost at home often and badly. And that's the thing that if this organization wants to get a foothold in the Toronto sports market, they can't go through that again. They have to play much better at home. Not that it doesn't matter to play well on the road, but at home is where the people show up and you want them to come back. And for them to come back, they get there, you get them there, and then you can't have them run away because the team that they go to see is losing 50-4. So that kind of stuff doesn't sell tickets. So that's one of I think the highlights of the Argos in regards to what they have to do this year is play well at home. They lose 20-7 in Winnipeg, not a surprise. Well-earned victory by Winnipeg, of course, and a defeat that I think in the eyes of when they look at the film, there's a lot they can work on to make their team better, the Toronto Argonauts. So that's not too bad a deal. So the Montreal Alouettes defeat the Edmonton Elks, my goodness, 30-13. Mark, we all know that the Montreal Alouettes were a great team in 2019. They made it to the playoffs. The team that took them out was this very team. So revenge was on their mind. And they played this game well from the very beginning and right to the end. And the Harris Sewell conversation, everybody waited on it. It happened not directly from Sewell, but it happened. This game was an interesting one for that reason.
I was kind of surprised too that the source of the controversy would be Armando Sewell. He's kind of a quiet guy. I've never heard him really say much of anything, to tell you the truth, except on the field, but he let his former quarterback have it and knocked him around on the field. And Montreal looked good in all phases of the game. Return game was very good. Adams was good. Their receivers were on target. Standback is quite a horse out of the backfield. So they looked very good. So I was quite impressed with what I saw from Montreal.
Yeah, they could trade their Montreal was able to trade their number one running back because they had so much confidence in Standback. And he was outstanding, David. Their game was full.
There's a reason why Standback got NFL interest. He's arguably, I think he's probably the best back in the CFL, just because he knows what it takes. I know that everyone will say Andrew Harris. I think Standback doesn't get enough credit for how much he makes that Montreal offense click. Vernon Adams doesn't have to throw the ball 30 times a game. He can pick and choose when he wants to make those plays, and I think that's what we saw. I also think that special teams was the winner for Montreal. I think Edmonton in that first game showed a little bit of vulnerability when you consider Ottawa had that one play that was wiped out with just by a half a yard, as we
Yeah.
mentioned last week. And I think they realized that they needed that Montreal could exploit that, and they did. Those are it's. I think some teams they don't. They always put too much stock into the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and then special teams kind of get not ignored, but it's not a strength of theirs. And so I look at that game, and I think Montreal realized we're going to try to be as clean as possible at all three phases. I didn't think their defense was going to be as good as they were. I mean, Edmonton finally got a touchdown. That was the big thing for them, but they only got one, and
And at a time when it didn't really matter, right?
didn't really
Yes,
matter.
absolutely.
And I think that's gonna. I'm very surprised that this is the issue Edmonton's dealing with, is that they cannot get scores. They have they have a good running back in James Wilder Jr. that can not just move the ball but get those second efforts to extend plays. But their receiving core should be able to get free, and that's just not happening right now.
This is something that's carried over from 2019. This is nothing new. The Harris-led Elks, they weren't the Elks back then, but the team that the way they looked this year early is the way they looked all 2019. Red zone failure was big on that team, and you can't win if you can't score.
That was the issue. The 20-yard line was kind of a barricade for them. I mean, Sean White had a magnificent year with the 20-yard line. And you're right. One of the reasons they made the coaching change in Edmonton is just they were just too inconsistent. They had some moments where they looked like they were a top-tier team, but no, they were just too erratic. So that's the situation. And now it's up to Jamie Elizondo to get them pointed forward.
Yeah, there were whispers before the season started that the Elks were a quiet favorite, to come out of the West. I'm sorry. Yeah, they could come out of the East too if they repeat what they did last year. But the point being that they should have been a better team, and they have not played anything like the team that many anticipated.
I agree. You got to get the receivers involved. Where's James Ellingson? Where's Darrell Walker?
Yeah, I mean, Darrell Walker didn't have much success in Toronto, and he seems to have continued in Edmonton in his new role, which is disappointment. It's too bad. I mean, well, the Edmonton fans deserve better, and I don't say this with any kind of it doesn't matter to me really. Just observing this Edmonton team has had difficulty over the past few years. This is a team with a very great reputation, an organization that does things soup to nuts. I mean, $1 million half and half the lotteries that they have, right? This is a great organization, and it's too bad because when teams lose like this at home, it's not good. It's not good when they lose games like this at home when they don't look good at all.
No, they didn't.
Two straight games where they don't put up more than 20 points and they only have one touchdown. They're trying to gather fans into Edmonton, but if you're not able to celebrate touchdowns, fans are going to. That's going to be a tough challenge for them. Is to make sure not only they get fans but keep the fans. And Trevor Harris, he's been known to get frustrated and let that frustration kind of dictate his game a little bit. And I'm a little worried that, I mean, after he didn't let the Sewell comments, Sewell comments kind of dictate his game, but you can tell that maybe that's just in the back of his mind a little bit.
Yep, just probably got to him a bit, I'm sure.
Well, in 3 Down Nation, there's a nice little article there from the boys over there suggesting that Harris got inside his own head, and that's a bad thing to say. But what worse is when it looks like that, and this guy's a great quarterback, but mentally sometimes he becomes unhinged. I'm not saying easily, but he does because he's such a competitor, and sometimes one has to control that competitiveness so it doesn't affect, like what happened a minute ago can't affect what you do this minute, and if that's the case, and with the great quarterbacks that you've seen in Calgary, I mean, going right to Flutie, Mark, a quarterback really does have to have a thick skin.
Very much so. Just shake off the prior play and get moving ahead. And you're right. I think Harris has started to press an awful lot. And to an extent, I think that's happened to Bo Levi Mitchell as well. He started to press a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And not being 100% healthy can also be a contributing
Yep.
factor.
Yeah, but Edmonton, I agree, is a fairly big disappointment. Did I expect him to win too? I don't know about that, but it's the way that they lost. That's kind of disappointing.
Exactly. At this point, guys, isn't the most important thing that a team needs to develop is the process of playing, not so much the results, because you got to believe in the system and you've got to believe that your team can execute that system. That's the most important thing. The results, I'm not saying they don't count. I'm just saying they're secondary at first.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear what you're saying. No preseason, but that's the same for everybody too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they lose Edmonton 30-13, and it wasn't a simple loss. The next game is our week 2 game 4. The highlight, I guess, Hamilton and Saskatchewan. These are two teams that I don't think when this season started and this schedule was laid out that people didn't think that this could be a Grey Cup matchup. Fair?
Fair. Completely. Saskatchewan did their part of the bargain, but on paper, I certainly agree with you. Yeah.
The hype of going into this game was very much that it was supposed to be a Grey Cup potential Grey Cup matchup. I mean, you have the top team in the East, top team in the West from 2019. So this was the game I was looking forward to the most because I wanted to see could Hamilton show that maybe week 1 was some jitters need to work out, getting some offensive linemen back would help, and I think they looked worse in my opinion. It's kind of hard to look worse when you only put up 6 points in the first game, and then they put up 8. And I don't know. Hamilton's it's a very tough situation right now for the over in Hammertown.
Yeah, Orlando Steinauer was taking smelling salts during the game.
I did see that. Is this something he's done before?
I don't know. I never noticed it before. But I'm just wondering.
I've just never seen that from a coach before.
Yeah.
I just saw it and I said, did I actually see that right now?
I mean, is the excitement of a game just not quite enough? You need something to. Okay, I'm glad it wasn't me. I just sort of kept saying, well, maybe I've missed something. Or
well, that's just
maybe
it.
I'm not paying attention.
I'm so glad that you noticed it too, because I still don't believe he did it. Not that the coach shouldn't do it. It's just you figure the coach. Well, anyway, I think it's self-evident. The questions that arise are self-evident. Obviously, he feels he needs to get. I guess that's an example of how much he feels he needs to be more on edge because his team is just not playing. I mean, when you have a guy like Simone Lawrence on your team who has been, run a little bit over the coals for not playing, within the rules, playing outside the rules, you don't expect that kind of game from him. You know what I mean? You expect an intensity level from Simone Lawrence that is noticeable. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't noticed Simone Lawrence.
I think that's very fair, yeah.
No, I think so. I mean, he's gonna get the tackles, but it's not the tackle. No, he can put up 8 tackles in a game, but that's not what they need from Simone Lawrence. They need those interceptions. They need the pressure on the quarterback. That's what he's been known for. And again, Orlando Steinauer's whole mantra is defense. That's why he was brought in. He's one of the best defensive. He was one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. And this team that defense just does not look anything like they did in 2019.
And Mark, Tommy Condell, had a great year in 2019. There's already some finger pointing that he doesn't have the plan that can work for the quarterbacks. I don't know. There are a lot of question marks in the quarterback position with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and I love always saying the fact that when the schedule's made up, the last thing you expected was to have problems in that position with the Hamilton Tiger Cats because they're probably top 2, top 3 at least of combination quarterbacks.
I would agree, and that's why it is so surprising, that they made the switch in the game that they did. And I don't think either exactly excelled, but does it set up a controversy? I don't know, or they just go back and realize Mazzoli's the guy, and he'll be the guy till he's not the guy, kind of thing. So, but it is a surprise, based on what they did and the offense that seemed to have a real flow to it. It's not there right now this year.
I just look at that offensive line, and they did their quarterback no favor. I mean, 6 sacks, like
Mhm.
that's again another repeat of the Grey Cup. I think the offensive line has taken a beating for Hamilton because they can't run the ball. They haven't been able to show that they can run the ball to take some of the pressure off of Mazzoli and even Dane Evans when he came in. He was 3 for 10 for 21 yards. Like that. Like if people are wondering if there's going to be a look at who's going to be starting. I mean, Dane Evans was just thrown into, a smoking fire, and there's just not much you can do at that point. But I just think that Mazzoli there's something not right there. I know that he had a lot of time to come back from that ACL injury, so it was made to believe that that wouldn't be a concern. I don't know if it's maybe just the pressure is getting to him both from the player, no, from the defense and from just himself to try to get things going. And we mentioned it last week, Frank. I don't think his receiving core is doing him many favors. Brandon Banks.
Yeah. The thing about Brandon Banks is we talked about Trevor Harrison. This is another CFL player that stands out in regards to getting into his own head. We talked about last week when he made that toss towards the official and an opposing player got in the way. I don't think it was intentional. But after that, he was just so emotionally charged. And we forget that these guys are human beings. And as human beings, some people deal with adversity or bad luck differently. And I don't know what you do to we have sports psychologists now, right, Mark?
Yeah.
And they got to be working overtime when it comes to Harris and Banks.
Yeah, Banks is a little volatile, a little up and down. So he's an interesting case. I still believe in him, but maybe they're just not getting him the ball in the same situations. I still think, though, he's got that speed. I still think he's a tremendous player. But I see Williams was doing a lot more of the returns too. Maybe they need to get his hands on the ball as a returner more. I don't know. I still believe in him. I still think he's really
well, reputably, Brandon Banks has a catch radius, probably one of the best in the league. So as a quarterback, it's not like you have to thread the needle.
Mm-hmm. No, and then get a few more receiver sweeps too going. Maybe there's some of that, but no, he's a good player. I still believe in him, and I think both quarterbacks will find him very soon.
And let's not forget, they played their first 2 games on the road, and then early in the season with no exhibition games, going on the road. That's why teams in the East that have had any success in the West is a good thing, because it's got to be hard, right, to get ready for a season of this kind, the way it started, and doing it on the road.
Oh yeah, it can't be easy, that's for sure. But that'll change. I'll give you the flip side. The Stampeders play their first 3 games at home, and then the balance of the season will a good chunk of it will be on the road. So
Absolutely.
it's a different schedule format this year, and that's just the way it is. But eventually, still got to play no matter what schedule format. A third of the games in Ontario, right? So
You're right, because almost half of Calgary's games at home have been played. Will have been played
by Labor Day. Be past
yeah.
halfway. Yeah.
Right. So 3 of 7 is almost half. When you only have 7 home and road games,
Yep.
you really got to make hay at home in the competitive Western Division. And with the advent of the Montreal Alouettes, the advancements that they've made, along with joining Hamilton and being a real competitive team, so if one of the other two, being Ottawa or Toronto, offers some sort of rebuffing of the Western representative in the Eastern Conference playoffs, the Western Conference is already tough to begin with.
Will we see a crossover this year again?
Yeah, and it might be harder this year, and more competitive. Remember, BC didn't make the playoffs. They did make a great charge. So as far as that's concerned, it's going to be an interesting season, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. We'll just see if the crossover is in effect. Yeah.
When was the last time you saw Hamilton's home opener come on the 4th game of the season? Like they're a team that thrives with that. I'm
Their home
pretty
crowd.
with the home crowd. I'm pretty sure they went undefeated at home. You know,
Yeah.
that's a team that relies, I think, heavily on the home field advantage. They're playing their first three on the road next week. They have the bye, and then they're in Montreal. So I think right now, if you're Montreal and Toronto, this is where you say your ears kind of perk up and say, "Oh, maybe there's a chance that we can, make the East a little more competitive than what people were thinking starting the year." And if you're Hamilton, I think your Week 3 match against Montreal is almost a must-win at this point.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, I would agree.
The Rough Riders. Saskatchewan has, well, last year they finished first. People tend to forget that they were, during the season, the best team in the West, not quite in the playoffs. This is a team that's well put together. Fajardo has proven that it's no fluke and that he's playing well. But real quick, what I'd like to comment on is, why is he running with the ball at the end of the game?
Why is he in the game at the end of the game?
Well, that's even more.
I don't know. Those are both good questions.
If he's not in a game, he won't be running.
That's my point. Yeah. So I don't know. I found it odd with the game.
Wasn't it odd? And he looked like he got hurt.
Yeah. That crossed my mind. This thing's over with. Move on. It's a 14-game season. I appreciate your blood and guts competitor and want to squeeze it all out, but you got to think of the big picture. So that'd be the only thing I would point fingers at the Rough Riders about. They look good. They picked up right where they left off. He's been good. Powell's been good. The receivers have been good. I wondered how they'd survive without some of the losses on the offensive line, and also Judge moving on, but they're good. They're a good team. Remember, I think they would have been in the Grey Cup last year if you were, or 19. Remember the West Final? They just had horrendous problems inside the 5. All these bizarre play calls, and I don't know, just run it up the middle. They outsmarted themselves. They didn't do that. Maybe they go to the Grey Cup and maybe they win the thing.
I think a couple things with Saskatchewan. One is, I think maybe AC Leonard wasn't getting as much credit. When Charleston Hughes and Cameron Judge left, everyone's like, "Oh, that's big losses for Saskatchewan." And AC Leonard's like, "I got us," in that regard. And then I think like Fajardo, we always knew how good he was with his legs. I think that just adds another dimension with that offense because they can run, the whole, run pass option where it can be either Powell or Fajardo taken off, and then that opens up potentials for receivers as well. Because when you have a quarterback that can run like Fajardo does, it makes your offense a little more unpredictable, and the defense has to guess a little bit more. And I think you saw that with Hamilton. They got caught a few times with that, and I totally agree. I'm not a fan of teams rolling out the quarterback late in the game. I think I've seen so many times where the littlest tweak can mean so much for a quarterback, especially one that runs. If there's one thing, he will get the yardage, but the defensive player is saying, "Oh, he's free game now. I'm going to do what I can." Not necessarily in a dirty fashion, but I'm going to make sure that if I hit him, it's going to hurt.
No matter how much things change, they still remain the same in the Canadian Football League. I mean, who'd have thought that escapability is an important quality in the Canadian Football League for a quarterback?
I saw it even against the same thing against Toronto. There was times where I thought Toronto was going to get a sack, and he'd move around. There was one play where they started at 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then ended up going for positive yardage. I think that's probably the quality of a CFL quarter that doesn't get enough credit, is being able to maneuver and get yourself open so that your receivers get more time, or even you just are able to move the sticks.
Extend plays.
And throwing on the run. That's something that a quarterback in the Canadian Football League, if they can run and if they can throw while they're running, add the escapability and the ability. Well, we saw Caleros, and I don't mean to go back to clip, but just to indication, he changed his arm angle to make a pass. All these little things that CFL quarterbacks have done for years, and we've seen the best of them have done those things, and watching how successful they're at it, it's no surprise. But we keep trying the drop back passers, I guess, because there aren't enough of the other kind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd like to think that teams would eventually catch on and look for only quarterbacks who have that scrambling ability. So it is strange, I must admit. But Caleros is tremendous, and so is Fajardo, and it's why their teams are where they are, or at least one of the reasons.
So the Rough Riders defense has not suffered in the off season. They made a couple of moves, and like David, like you said, I think that's a fair statement. Where the nice thing about football, and so many players play on the team, the importance of an individual player sometimes isn't highlighted until they're in the spotlight, and we've seen that. Zach Evans gets hurt in this game. I don't know. I haven't heard yet to what extent. He's a guy that they'll miss if he's hurt.
Yeah, that's injuries are going to be are going to play such a huge factor early on in the season. I mean, the Argos are feeling it too. I mean, they have lost quite a few guys over the last few games. I'm sure. I mean, Calgary right now, they got the biggest injury question of all at quarterback with Bo. I don't know if you have any update on that, Mark.
A few minutes. That's why I'm checking. I'm not being rude. I'm just making sure they're not
going
to go early on me and leave me behind.
No, don't get left behind, because we're counting on you giving us the scoop. So we don't mind if you know. But yeah. We don't mind.
A lot of people are hanging on those words of a few minutes here. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. And it's got to be something. Even though the Red Blacks didn't play because they got the bye, something to talk about with them. Nichols, when he did play in the last week, didn't look 100% healthy. This extra week might help with him.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. It was a win, but it was a fairly uninspiring win. So, but it's still good, still a win nonetheless. Let's give them credit. But let's see how they do in their return to action here, because they didn't show me a lot, I guess, but showed me enough.
Yeah, I mean, the defense was really good, but how much can a defense cover up for an offense that didn't exactly put up many yards? And in the CFL, if you're not able to move to get those plays, you're not able to score. The other team's going to figure it out. And unfortunately, they're going up against a team that is going to make sure that you cannot move the ball on them. And they will take advantage of any mistakes you put forward, especially on offense.
Yeah, with the Red Blacks, the good news for them, if you're a Red Blacks fan, is that you played not so great, but you won. You know, how many teams that lost this week and last week would wish that they would have looked good when they lost? You know, it's so
16 points isn't often a winning formula. So
no,
yeah. Oh, we've got a couple of minutes left, guys. A lot of people have predicted that the defenses would be ahead of the offenses early in the season. Your view on that, David?
No, I think that's especially true. I mean, we look at Ottawa. I think Ottawa, Winnipeg, and BC, two of those teams not many had high expectations for. And two of them, I think, are using their defense as kind of the let's take a little pressure off the offense by being able to make plays on defense. I mean, I knew Saskatchewan and Winnipeg were going to have good defenses, and I think they're a lot better than I think I gave them credit for, which I think is tough to say when they're the top units in the league. But I think a lot of teams are realizing it's going to take time for the offense to get going, so let's make sure our defensive fundamentals are there to create turnovers and give more opportunities for the offense. I think for the offense, the more chances you give them to more plays you can give them, especially short field, it's going to help the offense out a lot. And I think the teams that are struggling the most, they haven't been able to shorten the field at all. And their defense have been, some of them, the defenses haven't been able to get those stops, or haven't been able to, or even the special teams to give the offense the opportunity. So you always give the defense an edge right off the hop.
I think that's evident with the point totals, the yardage totals, that it's certainly the defense is in charge right now, and the offenses are playing catch up. I hope the balance is a little more even as we go into the season, but right now you have to put the defensive side a few steps ahead of the offense.
Yeah, I look to see, we've seen some high scores, like Saskatchewan with 30, Montreal with 30. Much of that too as well, a lot of times offense is masked by good defenses, because without a good defense, offenses don't work on their own. It's great when the special teams gives them the ball in good position, as the defense might. So that kind of helps as well. But the point is, and we've learned it with Edmonton and some other teams that have had difficulty in the red zone. So at the end of the day, it comes down to execution. And maybe earlier in the season, defenses can surprise offenses. And also, because of all the new players in the defense, you have to know what you're up against so you can set up your offense.
I think that's very fair. Yeah, it's good analysis and watch it unfold here. But yeah, it's defense. You can plug players in a little easier than offense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we watched some really good football in week 2. Week 3 features Edmonton and BC. Any quick comments, Mark?
Edmonton better get going. There's going to be a lot of pressure if they don't. Not that I worry a lot about them, but they've had 2 fairly uninspiring games. So, and see how BC does at home. So.
David?
I think this is a kind of a battle for third right now. If you look at the way the Saskatchewan Winnipeg are playing, I think you got 3 teams right there in BC, Calgary, and Edmonton that are going to be battling for that third place. So really, this is a crucial game for both teams. I think more so for Edmonton because they need to get that first win. Because you go start the season 0-3, not a lot of room to catch up.
No, I agree.
I think Edmonton must take advantage of the fact that it's a road game where they get a chance to concentrate on the game before they play it. If they do that, they'll be competitive with BC. Obviously, BC is a much better team in 2021 this early as opposed to 2019. Montreal and Calgary, this is going to be an interesting battle because over the past years, Mark, as you know, Montreal, even in Calgary's great seasons, has given fits to Calgary.
Yeah, last time they were here in 19 was a sensational game. 41-37. The quarterback picture in Calgary will decide a lot. We'll find out about that. But Montreal looked really good. They're going to be a handful. And I think the Stampeders, if they fall to 0-3 and in a 14-game season, they're suddenly playing from behind and swimming upstream. So it's a vital game for the Stampeders. It's starting to get late a little early in this season for the Stampeders.
David?
Yeah, I think for Calgary, if it's going to be O'Connor starting, I think that's a tough start, against an offense that's rolling right now. And I think if you're Calgary, you have to let Vernon Adams beat you. Don't let the special teams beat you. Don't let Stanback beat you. I think Calgary did a really good job against the run in week 1 against Toronto, or at least they did a pretty decent job. And against BC, it wasn't that bad as well. So I think that's going to be crucial for him is that Vernon Adams is going to have to throw the ball a lot more. He didn't throw a lot against, he didn't have to, but I think you got to force him to beat you more than, and O'Connor's just going to have to play clean. I think playing clean football, he has some guys that can make plays. He's just gonna have to make sure that he doesn't make that many mistakes. And in our limited time we saw him in Toronto, he wasn't he wasn't a guy that threw risky plays. But I think he has no better support system right now than Dave Dickinson to get him ready, if that's the case.
Game 3 on Saturday, Winnipeg in Toronto. Nothing will help the fans here appreciate their team more and wash away last season's showings at home than a victory against Winnipeg, or at least play real well. Mark?
Yeah, I agree. And they're capable, but Winnipeg would certainly have to be the favorite entering this game. But, maybe the Argos can smooth out a strong first game and a less than impressive second game and find their happy medium somewhere, because certainly it's a very talented roster, but right now it's players, not a team.
David?
One of the few wins they had at home in 2019 was against Winnipeg, and it was a very surprising win. I think Toronto's going to have to be a little more creative on offense and take advantage of some of the aggressiveness from Winnipeg. I think it'll be closer, but I'm still going to give the edge to Winnipeg just based on what they were able to do in week 2.
We'll see how La Police and the Ottawa Red Blacks perform against La Police's former Banjo Bowl opposition in this game. It's going to be a good test for Ottawa, and I think, Mark, what you said about Ottawa, we're going to find out, how real they are.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of faith in them, but you know what? It's one game. Maybe they got all their bad mistakes out of the way early, but they're going into a very tough environment. But we'll wait and see. Maybe Saskatchewan, sometimes they do read their own clippings and get a little wound up themselves. But no, I would say Saskatchewan would be a fairly heavy favorite here.
No, I definitely think so too. Saskatchewan they're rolling on all fronts right now, and I think unless Ottawa somehow is able to take advantage of the time off to work on their offense, I don't think their offense is going to be good enough. Their defense is good, but I think there's going to be too much pressure on the offense to play that well against Saskatchewan.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thanks very much. Enjoyed it, and we'll try to get you a scoop here. But good to talk football, and good we're 3 weeks in now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark Stephen. It was a pleasure. Play-by-play man for the Calgary Stampeders, and of course, David Morassutti of Sportsnet. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch, download it, and watch it. I'm Candid.